For Peter Bergstrom and everyone else in Cupertino, it was an unusual Wednesday.
I heard there was a shooting in Cupertino, and I was like, oh, that's weird. Nothing happens in Cupertino.
Early that morning, 47-year-old Sharif Allman had opened fire on his coworkers at the Lehigh Permanente cement plant about a mile southwest of the intersection of I-280 and State Route 85. On the roads, the news first reached commuters like Bergstrom through normal radio broadcasts, but on the internet, an entirely different sort of conversation came to the surface. In Silicon Valley and beyond, citizens turned to social media tools online to monitor the hunt for Allman and make sense of the danger for their friends, their families, and themselves. Hundreds of people around the world used Twitter to organize incoming information about the shooting's aftermath. Stanford University professor and virtual community expert Howard Reingold said the events of October 5th reflect a recent shift in who sets the news agenda. He added that this unbundling of the news has stripped local newspapers of much of their long-standing power.
Whether you agree with it or not, the newspaper editor was somebody whose specialty was the news and trying to put that recipe together. Now, it's the consumer of news, very few of which would consider themselves to be experts on news.
As one of those consumers, Bergstrom said he usually does more reading than tweeting when he uses Twitter. But after he reached his office in Cupertino the day of the shooting, he found a way to put the San Francisco-based microblogging site to productive use.
I was talking to people here who was like, okay, our building is in lockdown, we can't go outside and all that stuff. But there was no information. So I thought, I should just check this out.
Online, he found the live streaming feed of the Santa Clara County Sheriff's Office and shared the link with his followers on Twitter. And Peter was not alone. By mid-afternoon, over 1,200 other online listeners found their way to the unfiltered stream. The social web has a lot to offer, but San Jose Mercury-News police and crime reporter Sean Webby said the mainstream media is still leading the pack. The self-described old-school reporter outlined how he visited Allman's neighborhood the day of the manhunt, knocking on doors in search of the few people who knew him well enough to help shape a profile of the shooter at large.
I personally try not to spend a hell of a lot of time thinking about how I'm going to get out pieces of information and what social media method or mode that I'm going to use than actually trying to find out the information and making sure it's accurate and synthesizing it the best I can.
New ways to share online have made verifying information a good practice for everyone, not just journalists. Based on his experience as a consumer of the news, Reingold said he believes Twitter has the latest news about 45 minutes ahead of more traditional media. The only problem is that Twitter can't always be accepted at face value. Reingold said skepticism and prior knowledge about a topic serve social media consumers better than blind trust.
Some news that breaks fast you can get first on Twitter, and some news that breaks fast you can get first on Twitter, and it's wrong.
The speed of breaking news in the internet age also means that the stories reporters have worked on for hours are perpetually at risk of getting bumped out of the limelight. Law enforcement continued to search for Allman in Sunnyvale and Cupertino late into the night, but the area got another jolt when Steve Jobs succumbed to his battle with cancer. The Apple CEO was dead at the age of 56. Webby said he understood immediately that his editors would have to push stories about the quarry shooting down the front page to make way for Jobs.
Those of us who were working on the Allman shooting realized that, that the Jobs death was the major news of the day, the big international news of the day, and there's just no question about that. So we understood that our story was going to be pushed a little bit into the shadows, but I don't think any of us thought that that was a bad thing. It is what it is.
The more important part of the news, he said, is not the river of information that washes over Twitter and the blogosphere. Rather, it's the journalists welcoming in the information overload and making sense of it for their readers.
You need trained, experienced reporters to make sense of chaotic crime scenarios that have public safety implications, and to be able to write thoughtful analyses about Jobs' influence and where does Apple go from here. The mode might be quickly changing, but in terms of the content itself, I think we're still pretty vital.
This is Eric Johnson for the Peninsula Press, a project of the Stanford Graduate Program in Journalism.